The secret investment. The busy streets of Chicago buzzed with life as Michael "Big Shaq" Williams stepped out of his sleek black SUV. He tucked his cap lower, a small smile on his face as he watched people walk by without a second glance. Being unrecognized felt good for a change. 10 years in the NBA had made Big Shaq a household name. His face had been plastered on billboards, cereal boxes, and sports magazines across the country. But what many fans didn't know was that Big Shaq had a business mind as sharp as his jump shot. "This is the spot," he mumbled to himself, looking up at the elegant stone building with its tasteful sign, the Silver Spoon. The restaurant stood proud between two modern glass structures, its classic architecture making it stand out in downtown Chicago. Big Shaq checked his watch, 3:30 p.m. Perfect timing. The lunch crowd had cleared out, and the dinner rush was still hours away. He pulled open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the scent of herbs and the soft classical music playing in the background. "Mr. Williams." Right on time, a tall man in a tailored suit greeted him, walking forward with an outstretched hand. This was Pate, Big Shaq's lawyer and the only person who knew about today's meeting. "Call me Mike in here," Big Shaq reminded him quietly, shaking his hand. "Is the owner here?" Pete nodded and gestured toward a back office. "Everything's ready for the final paperwork." Big Shaq had been eyeing the Silver Spoon for months. Unlike the flashy sports bars and burger joints that many retired athletes invested in, this was a respected establishment with a rich history. The current owner, an older gentleman named Joe, who had run the place for 30 years, was ready to retire but wanted to make sure his life's work ended up in good hands. The back office was small but elegant, with dark wood paneling and framed black and white photos of the restaurant through the decades. "Mike," Joe said warmly, standing up from behind his desk. "Good to see you again." They shook hands, and Joe gestured for Big Shaq to take a seat. "I've been thinking about what you said last time," Joe began, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "About wanting to keep the restaurant's identity separate from your public persona." Big Shaq nodded. "I meant every word. The Silver Spoon has its own reputation, a great one. People shouldn't come here because they might see me or because I own it. They should come for the same reasons they always have. The food, the atmosphere, the experience." Joe smiled, clearly pleased. "That's exactly why I'm comfortable selling to you. Most celebrities would want their name all over the place." "Not my style," Big Shaq replied. "I've got other businesses for that. This place is special. It should stay that way." Pete laid out the paperwork, and Big Shaq reviewed each page carefully. This would be his 5th restaurant investment, but the first where he planned to remain completely behind the scenes. No press releases, no Big Shaq's Silver Spoon rebranding, no basketball memorabilia on the walls. "I've got one condition," Joe said as Big Shaq picked up the pen. "You keep my staff. Some of these folks have been with me for decades. They're the heart of this place." Big Shaq didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. I wouldn't dream of changing the team. In fact, I plan to keep everything running just as it is for now. I'll observe, learn, and only make changes if they're absolutely necessary." Joe nodded, visibly relieved. "Then we have a deal." As they signed the papers, Big Shaq couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This wasn't just another business venture, it was a legacy he was taking on, one that he respected deeply. "When do you plan to tell the staff?" Pete asked as they wrapped up. Big Shaq thought for a moment. "Not right away. I want to see how things run when nobody knows who's in charge. Maybe I'll drop by as a customer first, get a feel for the place from that side." Joe chuckled. "That should be interesting. Just be prepared. Not everyone will recognize you, especially in our older crowd." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Big Shaq replied with a grin. "Sometimes being invisible is the best way to see the truth." Little did he know just how revealing that truth would be. The incognito visit. 3 months flew by since Big Shaq had signed the papers for the Silver Spoon. During this time, he kept his distance, allowing the restaurant to operate just as it had before the ownership change. The only person on staff who knew about the new owner was Tina, the general manager who had worked alongside Joe for 15 years. She had been sworn to secrecy. Big Shaq stood in front of his bedroom mirror, buttoning up a simple navy blue shirt. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just regular clothes that wouldn't turn heads. He pulled on a pair of dark jeans and slipped his feet into some casual brown shoes. "Looking mighty ordinary today," he said to his reflection with a chuckle. At 6'8", he could never truly blend in, but without the usual trappings of wealth and fame, he looked different enough that people might not immediately place him. His phone buzzed on the dresser. It was a text from his buddy Rick. "Still on for courtside seats tonight? Lakers in town." Big Shaq typed back, "Not tonight. Got other plans. Rain check." This was the first time in years he turned down courtside tickets, but tonight was more important. Tonight, he would finally see his investment in action from a perspective most owners never got to experience. The drive downtown was slow. Chicago traffic had its usual crawl. Big Shaq could have taken a car service, but that would have defeated the purpose. Tonight, he was just Mike, a regular guy going out for dinner. He'd found a parking spot 3 blocks away and walked to the restaurant, enjoying the anonymity of being just another pedestrian on the busy street. A few people did double takes as he passed. At his height, that was unavoidable, but nobody approached him. The Silver Spoon looked different in the evening light, its windows glowing warmly against the darkening sky. Big Shaq paused across the street, watching as well-dressed couples and groups entered the restaurant. He felt a twinge of pride. This place was partly his now. Taking a deep breath, he crossed the street and pushed through the door. The restaurant was buzzing with conversation and soft jazz music. Crystal glasses clinked, and the rich aroma of gourmet food filled the air. A young woman stood at the host stand, dressed in black with her hair pulled back neatly. She looked up at Big Shaq, then glanced down at her reservation book without a flicker of recognition. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" she asked professionally. "No, I'm afraid not," Big Shaq replied. "Just thought I'd try my luck." The hostess bit her lip, scanning the packed dining room. "We're quite full tonight, but," she tapped her pen against the book, "I might be able to seat you at one of our smaller tables near the kitchen. Would that be acceptable?" Big Shaq smiled. "That would be perfect, thank you." He followed her through the maze of tables, noticing how conversations flowed, how servers moved efficiently between guests. Everything looked well run, just as Joe had promised. The hostess led him to a small table tucked in a corner, partially hidden by a decorative screen. "Your server will be with you shortly," she said, handing him a menu before hurrying back to her post. Big Shaq settled into his chair, which was a bit small for his frame. He could see into the kitchen from here, catching glimpses of the chefs in their white coats working with focused precision. The table wobbled slightly when he leaned on it. Not exactly the VIP treatment, but that was exactly the point. He opened the menu, curious to see if the offerings had changed. Everything looked the same, classic dishes with modern twists that had made the Silver Spoon famous among Chicago's food lovers. A few minutes passed before he noticed a server approaching his table. The man was tall and thin, with slicked back hair and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. His name tag read Derek. "Good evening," Derek said flatly, barely making eye contact. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Big Shaq had no idea that this seemingly routine interaction was about to become one of the most memorable dining experiences of his life, for all the wrong reasons. The dismissive waiter. "Just water for now," Big Shaq replied with a smile, trying to establish a friendly connection with Derek. The waiter gave a slight nod and walked away without another word. Big Shaq raised his eyebrows, surprised by the cold reception. He glanced around to see if other servers treated their customers the same way, but he noticed most tables were enjoying warm, attentive service. When Derek returned with the water, he placed it on the table with barely a glance at Big Shaq. "Are you ready to order?" he asked, his pen hovering impatiently above his notepad. "Actually, I have a few questions about the menu," Big Shaq said. "This is my first time here." Derek's sigh was barely disguised. "What would you like to know?" he asked, checking his watch. "I'm torn between the roasted duck and the sea bass. Which would you recommend?" "They're both popular," Derek replied flatly. Big Shaq waited for more information, but none came. "Well, how is the duck prepared?" "It's roasted with orange and herbs," Derek answered, the words coming out like he was reading a grocery list. A couple was seated at the table next to Big Shaq's, and he couldn't help but notice how their server greeted them warmly, offering detailed descriptions of the daily specials with genuine enthusiasm. "You know what?" Big Shaq said. "I think I'll start with the truffle risotto appetizer, then the duck. And could you recommend a good wine to pair with that?" Derek's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Big Shaq's casual clothing. "Our wines start at $80 a bottle," he said, emphasizing the price. "That's fine," Big Shaq replied. "I'm thinking maybe a good Pinot Noir." "We have a California Pinot for $95, Derek said, his tone suggesting he doubted Big Shaq could afford it. "Perfect. I'll take a bottle of that." Derek wrote down the order, a slight frown crossing his face. As he walked away, Big Shaq heard him mutter something to another server. Though he couldn't make out the exact words, the dismissive chuckle that followed told him all he needed to know. While waiting for his appetizer, Big Shaq observed the restaurant more carefully. The service staff moved with precision, except for Derek, who seemed to give minimal attention to his corner table while lavishing care on tables with more expensively dressed guests. When the risotto arrived, Derek set it down quickly. "Enjoy," he said, already turning away. "Excuse me," Big Shaq called after him. "Could I get some fresh pepper?" Derek paused, visibly annoyed. "Of course," he replied, retrieving a pepper mill from a nearby station. He gave it 3 quick turns over the dish. "Anything else?" he asked, clearly hoping the answer would be no. "The wine," Big Shaq reminded him. "Right. Coming up." The risotto was delicious, cooked to perfection with just the right balance of truffle flavor. The kitchen, at least, was living up to the Silver Spoon's reputation. Derek returned with the wine, presenting the bottle with mechanical efficiency before opening it. He poured a small taste for Big Shaq, who nodded his approval after sampling it. Derek filled the glass halfway and placed the bottle on the table, not offering the usual explanation of the wine's characteristics or origin that Big Shaq had observed at other tables. Throughout the meal, Derek's service remained cold and minimal. When Big Shaq asked for bread, Derek pointed out that it had already been served once, though other tables were receiving second baskets without having to ask. When the duck arrived, it was placed on the table without any description of the dish or the sides accompanying it. A group of businessmen in expensive suits were seated at a nearby table, and Big Shaq couldn't help but notice the stark difference in treatment. Derek was suddenly all smiles, describing each special in loving detail, making recommendations, and checking back frequently. When Big Shaq's water glass sat empty for 15 minutes, he finally caught Derek's eye as he passed by. "Could I get a refill, please?" Big Shaq asked. "We're a bit busy right now," Derek replied, gesturing to the full restaurant. "I'll get to it when I can." As Big Shaq watched him immediately refill waters at the businessman's table, he shook his head slightly. This wasn't just bad service, it was selective bad service, and it was happening in his restaurant. The question now was, what was he going to do about it? The insult. As Big Shaq finished the last bite of his duck, which was admittedly delicious despite the poor service, he noticed Derek chatting comfortably with the businessman at the next table. They were laughing about something, the kind of easy conversation that should happen between a good server and his guests. The contrast to his own experience couldn't have been clearer. Derek eventually made his way back to Big Shaq's table, clearing the plate with barely a glance. "How was everything?" he asked, clearly not interested in the answer. "The food was excellent," Big Shaq replied honestly. "Compliments to the chef." Derek nodded, already turning away. "Actually," Big Shaq said, causing Derek to pause, "I'm curious about this place. Has it been around long?" Derek turned back reluctantly. 30 years, he answered shortly. "That's impressive," Big Shaq continued, genuinely interested. "Same owner all that time?" Something flickered across Derek's face, annoyance mixed with suspicion. "No. The original owner sold it a few months back." "Really?" Big Shaq leaned forward. "That's interesting. Do you know who bought it?" Derek's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do you want to know?" Big Shaq shrugged casually. "Just curious. I like the place. Wondering if they're planning any changes." Derek looked around, then lowered his voice. "Look, man, if you're trying to get a job here or something, this isn't the way to do it. The management doesn't like people asking a bunch of questions." "No, nothing like that," Big Shaq assured him. "I'm just interested in the restaurant business." I've heard good things about the silver spoon. Derek glanced at Big Shaq's casual clothes again, making no effort to hide his judgment. Yeah, well, this isn't the kind of place where you can talk your way into meeting the owner or anything. Those guys don't have time for, you know. He gestured vaguely at Big Shaq. Those guys? Big Shaq repeated. So you've met the new owner? Derek scoffed, his professional mask slipping entirely. Nobody's met him. He never comes around. Some ex-basketball player who probably doesn't know a souffle from a soup can. Big Shaq raised his eyebrows, fighting to keep his expression neutral. An ex-basketball player? That's unusual. Yeah, just another celebrity throwing money around, Derek said with obvious disdain. Probably bought it as a tax write-off or something. These sports guys think they can just buy their way into any business without knowing the first thing about fine dining. A couple at another table signaled for Derek's attention, but he was on a roll now, seemingly glad to have someone to share his complaints with. Between you and me, Derek continued, lowering his voice, this place used to be special. Now it's just another trophy for some rich guy who'll probably turn it into a sports bar once he gets bored with it. Big Shaq nodded slowly, taking a sip of his wine to hide his reaction. That would be a shame. Yeah, well, that's how it goes, Derek said with a shrug. Anyway, would you like to see the dessert menu? His tone shifted back to professional indifference. The brief moment of candid conversation closed. Sure, Big Shaq replied. And maybe you could tell me a bit about the chef. The food really is outstanding. Derek's face tightened again. Look, I don't mean to be rude, but I've got other tables to attend to. People who are, regulars. He glanced meaningfully at the businessman's table. Of course, Big Shaq said quietly. I understand. As Derek walked away, Big Shaq sat back in his chair, thinking. He'd come here wanting an authentic experience as a regular customer, and he'd certainly gotten it, though not in the way he hoped. He'd learned something valuable tonight. While the food maintained its excellence, there was a serious problem with how certain staff treated customers they deemed unimportant. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to Tina, the general manager. We need to talk. Are you still at the restaurant? The reply came back almost immediately. Yes, in the office. Everything okay? It will be, Big Shaq typed, pocketing his phone as Derek returned with the dessert menu. What Derek didn't know was that the next few minutes would completely change the course of his career, and possibly his life. The small smile forming on Big Shaq's face wasn't just about the chocolate souffle listed on the menu. It was about what was coming next. The revelation. Big Shaq savored the last spoonful of his chocolate souffle, which was light and perfectly cooked. The food, at least, lived up to the silver spoon's reputation. He placed his napkin on the table and signaled to Derek, who was busy chatting with the businessman again. After a few minutes, Derek finally made his way over. Was there something else? He asked, not bothering to hide his impatience. Just the check, please, Big Shaq replied politely. Derek nodded and walked away, returning quickly with the bill folder. He placed it on the table and stepped back, clearly not expecting much of a tip after the basic service he provided. Big Shaq took out his credit card and slipped it into the folder without looking at the total. He knew exactly how much everything cost. He had approved the menu prices himself 3 weeks ago. While waiting for Derek to return with his card, Big Shaq watched the other diners enjoying their meals. An older couple laughed together over dessert. A group of friends clinked wine glasses in celebration. This was exactly the atmosphere he had wanted to preserve when he bought the place. Derek returned, placing the receipt and card on the table. Thank you for dining with us, he said flatly, the words memorized and meaningless. Actually, Big Shaq said, could I speak with the manager before I leave? Derek's expression shifted immediately to concern. Is there a problem with the food? He suddenly seemed worried, probably thinking about how a complaint might reflect on him. No, the food was excellent, Big Shaq assured him. I'd just like to have a word. Derek hesitated, then nodded stiffly. I'll get Miss Chen for you. As Derek walked away, Big Shaq signed the receipt, leaving a generous tip despite the poor service. He believed in treating people well, even when they didn't return the favor. A few minutes later, a woman in her early 40s approached his table. She wore a tailored black suit, her dark hair pulled back neatly. This was Tina Chen, the general manager who'd been helping him behind the scenes. "Good evening, sir. I'm Tina Chen, the general man." Her professional greeting stopped mid-sentence as recognition dawned in her eyes. "Mr. Williams, I didn't expect to see you tonight." Her voice carried across the nearby tables. Several diners looked up, curious. One of the businessmen at the next table nearly choked on his drink, suddenly realizing who had been sitting nearby all evening. Derek, who was serving coffee to another table, froze in place. The coffee pot tilted dangerously in his hand as the color drained from his face. "Hello, Tina," Big Shaq said warmly, standing to shake her hand. At his full height, there was no mistaking him now. "I decided to come by and see how things are running from a customer's perspective." "I hope everything was satisfactory," Tina said, shooting a nervous glance toward Derek, who was still frozen in place. "The food was outstanding," Big Shaq replied, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Chef Louis is living up to his reputation, but I think we should discuss the service in your office, and I'd like Derek to join us if he could." The whispers started immediately. Diners leaned towards each other, eyes wide with surprise and interest. The businessman who had recognized Big Shaq was already typing furiously on his phone, probably posting about the encounter on social media. Derek finally unfroze, nearly dropping the coffee pot as he hastily set it down. His face had gone from pale to bright red in seconds. He approached the table slowly, like a man walking to his execution. You're? Derek stammered, unable to form a complete sentence. Big Shaq extended his hand. "Michael Williams. But my friends call me Big Shaq, and I own this restaurant." The nearby tables had gone silent, everyone straining to hear the exchange. Someone whispered, "That's Big Shaq," and a ripple of excitement spread through the dining room. Derek looked like he might pass out. He took Big Shaq's hand automatically, his own trembling visibly. "Mr. Williams, I didn't." "I think we should continue this conversation in private," Big Shaq said, nodding toward Tina's office. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. As the three of them made their way through the restaurant, conversations erupted in their wake. Derek walked with his head down, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. This wasn't just embarrassing. This could be the end of his career at the Silver Spoon. What Derek didn't know was that Big Shaq had something very different in mind than what he was expecting. The confrontation. Tina's office was small but well organized, with framed restaurant reviews on the walls and a desk covered with neatly stacked papers. She closed the door behind them, cutting off the excited buzz from the dining room. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to the chairs in front of her desk. Big Shaq sat down comfortably, seeming perfectly at ease. Derek lowered himself into the other chair like a man expecting a firing squad. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip his knees to steady them. "Mr. Williams, I am so sorry about this," Tina began, her voice tight with worry. "If I had known you were coming." Big Shaq held up his hand. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you. I wanted to experience the restaurant as a regular customer would." He turned to Derek, whose face was still flushed with embarrassment. "And I certainly got that experience, didn't I?" Derek swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't know what to say. How about starting with why you thought it was okay to treat me differently than those businessmen at the next table?" Big Shaq asked, his voice calm but firm. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no good answer to that question. "I'm not asking to embarrass you," Big Shaq continued. "I genuinely want to understand what was going through your mind." Derek took a deep breath. I made assumptions based on how you were dressed," he admitted, staring at the floor. "I thought you were just some guy who wandered in and couldn't afford to be here. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." "But that's the problem, isn't it?" Big Shaq leaned forward. "You shouldn't treat someone differently based on what they're wearing, or whether you think they can afford to be here." "No, sir," Derek mumbled. "And what about those comments about the ex-basketball player owner?" Big Shaq asked, raising an eyebrow. "The one who doesn't know a souffle from a soup can." Derek's face went from red to ghostly pale. "I never should have said that. I was completely out of line." Tina looked horrified. "Derek, that's grounds for immediate termination," she said sharply. Derek nodded miserably. "I know. I'll clean out my locker." He started to stand up. "Sit down," Big Shark said firmly. "I'm not done yet." Derek sank back into his chair, looking like a man awaiting his sentence. "I could fire you," Big Shark said, his eyes fixed on Derek's face. "And honestly, no one would blame me for doing it. But I'm curious, how long have you worked here?" 7 years, Derek replied quietly. "That's a long time," Big Shark nodded. "Tina, before tonight, what kind of server has Derek been?" Tina hesitated, clearly torn between honesty and loyalty to her boss. "He's actually one of our best, very knowledgeable about the menu and wines. Great with the regulars." "But only with certain regulars, from what I saw," Big Shark pointed out. "The ones who look like they have money." Derek couldn't meet his eyes. "I guess I'd fallen into some bad habits," he admitted. "When I bought this place," Big Shark said, looking around the small office, "I didn't do it as a vanity project or a tax write-off. I did it because I respect what the Silver Spoon has built over 30 years. This restaurant has always been about excellent food and impeccable service for everyone who walks through those doors." He leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. "Everyone who comes here deserves respect, Derek. Not just the people in expensive suits, not just the regulars. Everyone." Derek nodded, finally looking up to meet Big Shark's gaze. "You're absolutely right, sir, and I'm truly sorry." "I believe you are," Big Shark said. "But being sorry isn't enough. This needs to be a learning moment, not just for you, but for all of us." Tina looked surprised. "You're not firing him?" "That would be the easy way up, wouldn't it?" Big Shark replied. "Fire Derek, hire someone else, problem solved." "But would that really change anything?" He stood up, his tall frame making the small office feel even smaller. "The real question is, how do we make sure this never happens again? Not just with Derek, but with any server in any restaurant." Derek looked up, confusion mixing with the faintest glimmer of hope on his face. "What are you suggesting, sir?" "I'm suggesting," Big Shark said, "that we have an opportunity here. An opportunity to make a real change in how customers are treated. But it's going to take work from all of us." He looked directly at Derek. "The question is, are you willing to do that work?" Derek straightened in his chair, meeting Big Shark's gaze steadily for the first time. "Yes, sir, I am." The confrontation. Tina's office was small but well organized, with framed restaurant reviews on the walls and a desk covered with neatly stacked papers. She closed the door behind them, cutting off the excited buzz from the dining room. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to the chairs in front of her desk. Big Shark sat down comfortably, seeming perfectly at ease. Derek lowered himself into the other chair like a man expecting a firing squad. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip his knees to steady them. "Mr. Williams, I am so sorry about this," Tina began, her voice tight with worry. "If I had known you were coming." Big Shark held up his hand. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you. I wanted to experience the restaurant as a regular customer would." He turned to Derek, whose face was still flushed with embarrassment. "And I certainly got that experience, didn't I?" Derek swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't know what to say. How about starting with why you thought it was okay to treat me differently than those businessmen at the next table?" Big Shaq asked, his voice calm but firm. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no good answer to that question. "I'm not asking to embarrass you," Big Shaq continued. "I genuinely want to understand what was going through your mind." Derek took a deep breath. I made assumptions based on how you were dressed," he admitted, staring at the floor. "I thought you were just some guy who wandered in and couldn't afford to be here. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." "But that's the problem, isn't it?" Big Shaq leaned forward. "You shouldn't treat someone differently based on what they're wearing, or whether you think they can afford to be here." "No, sir," Derek mumbled. "And what about those comments about the ex-basketball player owner?" Big Shaq asked, raising an eyebrow. "The one who doesn't know a souffle from a soup can." Derek's face went from red to ghostly pale. "I never should have said that. I was completely out of line." Tina looked horrified. "Derek, that's grounds for immediate termination," she said sharply. Derek nodded miserably. "I know. I'll clean out my locker." He started to stand up. "Sit down," Big Shark said firmly. I'm not done yet. Derek sank back into his chair, looking like a man awaiting his sentence. I could fire you, Big Shaq said, his eyes fixed on Derek's face. And honestly, no one would blame me for doing it. But I'm curious, how long have you worked here? 7 years, Derek replied quietly. That's a long time, Big Shaq nodded. Tina, before tonight, what kind of server has Derek been? Tina hesitated, clearly torn between honesty and loyalty to her boss. He's actually one of our best, very knowledgeable about the menu and wines. Great with the regulars. But only with certain regulars, from what I saw, Big Shaq pointed out. The ones who look like they have money. Derek couldn't meet his eyes. I guess I'd fallen into some bad habits, he admitted. When I'd bought this place, Big Shaq said, looking around the small office, I didn't do it as a vanity project or a tax write-off. I did it because I respect what the Silver Spoon has built over 30 years. This restaurant has always been about excellent food and impeccable service for everyone who walks through those doors. He leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. Everyone who comes here deserves respect, Derek. Not just the people in expensive suits, not just the regulars. Everyone. Derek nodded, finally looking up to meet Big Shaq's gaze. You're absolutely right, sir, and I'm truly sorry. I believe you are, Big Shaq said. But being sorry isn't enough. This needs to be a learning moment, not just for you, but for all of us. Tina looked surprised. You're not firing him. That would be the easy way up, wouldn't it? Big Shaq replied. Fire Derek, hire someone else, problem solved. But would that really change anything? He stood up, his tall frame making the small office feel even smaller. The real question is, how do we make sure this never happens again? Not just with Derek, but with any server in any restaurant. Derek looked up, confusion mixing with the faintest glimmer of hope on his face. What are you suggesting, sir? I'm suggesting, Big Shaq said, that we have an opportunity here. An opportunity to make a real change in how customers are treated. But it's going to take work from all of us. He looked directly at Derek. The question is, are you willing to do that work? Derek straightened in his chair, meeting Big Shaq's gaze steadily for the first time. Yes, sir, I am. The second chance. 6 months had passed since that fateful night when Derek discovered the truth about his casual customer. The Silver Spoon looked the same from the outside. Elegant, understated, a fixture in Chicago's dining scene. But inside, subtle changes were evident to anyone who paid attention. The early morning sunlight streamed through the windows as Big Shaq walked through the front door. The restaurant wouldn't open for lunch service for another 3 hours, but staff were already busy preparing. A young woman polishing glasses at the bar looked up and smiled. Good morning, Mr. Williams, she called cheerfully. Morning, Jenny, he replied. How's that culinary school application coming along? Her face lit up. I submitted it yesterday. Thanks for the recommendation letter. Big Shaq nodded, pleased. One of the changes he'd implemented was a staff development program, encouraging employees to grow their skills and pursue their passions within the industry. He made his way to the back, where several servers were gathered around a table. Derek stood at the head, a tablet in his hand, speaking confidently to the group. Remember, we don't just serve food here, we create experiences, Derek was saying. Every guest deserves our full attention and respect, no matter what they're wearing or how they look. Big Shaq hung back, watching the training session with quiet satisfaction. After their confrontation 6 months ago, he'd made Derek an offer that surprised everyone. Instead of firing him, he put him in charge of a new service training program. The person who made the mistake is often the best person to teach others how to avoid it, Big Shaq had reasoned. Derek, grateful for the second chance, had thrown himself into the role with unexpected passion. The program had evolved into something remarkable. All new staff now went through Derek's training, which focused not just on technical skills, but on unconscious bias and equal treatment of all guests. Veteran servers took refresher courses every few months. The results spoke for themselves. Customer satisfaction scores had risen by 20%, and the Silver Spoon had recently been featured in a major magazine as a model of exceptional service. Derek noticed Big Shaq and wrapped up his session. As the other servers dispersed to their stations, he approached with a confident smile, a far cry from the terrified waiter of 6 months ago. "Morning, boss," he said. "I was just finishing up with the new hires." "I caught the end of it," Big Shaq replied. "Good stuff." Derek nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "You know, I still think about that night sometimes. How close I came to losing everything because of my own prejudice." "But you didn't lose everything," Big Shaq pointed out. "You turned it around. That's what matters." "Only because you gave me the chance to," Derek said. "Most owners would have fired me on the spot." Big Shaq shrugged. "Maybe. But then we wouldn't have this program, would we? Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the best innovations." They walked together toward the kitchen, where Chef Louis was creating a new dish for the evening special. "How's the turnover been since we implemented the program?" Big Shaq asked. "Almost none," Derek replied proudly. 6 months without a single server quitting. That's unheard of in this industry. "And the reviews?" Derek grinned. "Check your email." "I sent you a link to a new one this morning. The food critic from the Tribune was here last week, came in wearing ripped jeans and a hoodie, said it was the best service he'd ever received, regardless of how he was dressed." Big Shaq laughed. "Maybe I should try that look next time." "Please do," Derek replied. "Though I think the staff might recognize you now, no matter what you wear." As they reached the kitchen, Chef Louis looked up from his creation and waved them overexcitedly. The restaurant was coming alive around them, staff moving with purpose and pride. Later that day, as Big Shaq sat in his office reviewing the numbers, he thought about how a potential disaster had transformed into something unexpectedly valuable. The incident with Derek had led to improvements he hadn't even thought to implement. The Silver Spoon wasn't just a successful restaurant now, it was becoming a model for the entire industry. His phone buzzed with a message from his business manager. "Another restaurant group wants to know if you license the training program. Interested?" Big Shaq smiled and glanced through his office window, where he could see Derek confidently leading a staff meeting. Sometimes the best leaders were the ones who had learned the hardest lessons. "Let's discuss it," he typed back. "And make sure Derek's involved in the conversation. This is his baby now." The story of the waiter who insulted Big Shaq hadn't ended that night in the manager's office. It had only just begun.